We are told time and time again that when individuals have the opportunity to hear the story of a Holocaust survivor face to face, it creates one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. They don't forget it. But our Holocaust survivors are aging, many of them have passed away, and we're faced with a challenge. How do we continue to create the impact of telling the story of an individual and what happened to them in the Holocaust, with the fact that there are no more survivors who are able to do that? How do we look a survivor in the eye? How do we hear that person's story? And how do we remember?
Everybody has a story to tell, and those stories are based on actual experiences. And I considered myself during World War II as just an average, normal foot soldier. I consider myself as having average, normal experiences with the exception of one. And the one was Dachau. It was so horrible that I didn't want to talk about it anymore. So I put it away, and I felt that if I didn't talk about it, it would go away. Of course, it didn't.
All the time of the war and the camps and everything, I never thought that I'm going to stay there. I always knew that I will survive. I don't know how, but and I mean, if you doubt about yourself, if you lost faith, you were gone right away.
We don't tell the story because it's too painful to tell the story. We talk about it sometimes between ourselves because we understand each other, what happened. We don't have to lay it out too much on the table because we know what we're talking about.
But it's important to tell the story, we know that, for the future generation to know what happened.
Tennessee Holocaust Commission has put this program together, Living On, combining portraits of Holocaust survivors, liberators, hidden children, refugees from the Holocaust, people with firsthand experience who currently live in the state of Tennessee, photographing them, interviewing them, and then putting the pictures and the words together in a format that people can look at, either in exhibition form or in book form or in brochure form, so that when these people are no longer with us, their words and their images will still be around for us to see, to tell their story.
We think that the Living On exhibit is a catalyst. It's a catalyst just as if you met a person on the street or you met them at a party. You ask questions. You ask questions of each other. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your story? What's your family like? We're going to do the same thing with the Living On exhibit. We are going to introduce you to your neighbors. We're going to introduce you to individuals who have stories to tell. But their story is going to be, many years ago, I was an eyewitness to one of the most unbelievable events known to mankind, the Holocaust. And I paid a big price for that. I may be alive, but those who I loved, those who I counted on, the community that I knew, the society I lived in, were all turned upside down. Many things have happened to those individuals in the 60 years since then. They came to America, they raised a family, they worked hard, they became productive citizens. But underlying their lives is this time. And so the conversation is going to be about then, and the conversation is going to be about now.
I was born in 1930, Höchst im Odenwald, Germany, near Frankfurt am Main. And Höchst was a very a rather small town. If you were Jewish, you were, especially in a small town, everybody knew you and knew who you were and your entire background. I started school early because actually there was nothing for me to do. My mother didn't allow me to go out and play because she was afraid we would be harmed if we went outside. I can never remember people that weren't anti-Semitic when I was a little girl. I mean, we were not allowed to go outside. If we did, we had people running after us with butcher knives. There was a butcher store near us, and it was just unheard of.
We lived in Lodz, Poland. This is the second largest city of Poland. I was 15 years when the war started. I had 5 siblings, 3 sisters and 2 brothers. Nobody survived. It was our teacher in school, the principal, she was from Austria. And in 1937, she went back home to visit her parents, and over there, Hitler was already there. The life for the Jews was already miserable. She came back and told us, we were at that time 13-year-old children, she hopes that Hitler will never come to Poland. Well, he came 2 years later. Here we suffered right when they came into Lodz. The first day they find the Jews, beat them up. Schools were not permitted for Jews. It was a different war. It was a war against Jews. Besides, you had a war going on between countries. It was a war against Jews. So in Lodz, the ghetto they started right away. First of all, they burned the synagogues. After 6 weeks being in the country, they burned the synagogue. We lived across the street, a big, nice synagogue. They burned it during the night. It was frightening to see the fire. This was the beginning.
The invasion I remember very well. I think it was the 2nd day of September that we already saw the Germans in the street. Now, I was 21 years old, and I was much more optimistic than I am now. And I remember sitting at the window, and I figured myself, maybe it will last 2 or 3 months, but then the French and the British will come and it will be liberated. Because by this time you already knew that they entered the war also. We were living in Lodz, and Warsaw was a city 100 kilometers away. And Lodz was a part of Poland that the Germans took over for them. And my parents thought that maybe Warsaw will be a better place for us. So they stayed in Lodz, they two, and they sent all the children to Warsaw. We thought that we could meet later, but we never did. For some reason they couldn't leave or whatever, and I never saw them again later. And when I went to Warsaw, I had my fiancé with me, Stefan Diamond, and he left his family and he went with me too, and we were married a few days later. We knew very well what was waiting for us under Hitler. We knew it very well. But, I mean, each day was a day more, and maybe something will happen.
I was born and raised in a town called Vilkamir in Lithuania. And, in fact, I'm not really supposed to be here because everybody in my hometown was killed. It was by sheer coincidence that we moved a year before the war started, that we moved to Kovno. I'm the youngest of 3 children. My brother and sister were each 6 years apart. I happened to be in summer camp 2 kilometers from the German border when the war broke out. So here I was a German prisoner within the first couple hours.
The reason I hate so much, my Lithuanian countrymen. During the year of the communist occupations, the Nazis recruited young men and they slipped them across the border into Germany, and they taught them in camps how to murder people without guns. And then they were slipped back into Lithuania, in cities and villages. And the day the war started, it was almost like an uprising against the Jews, because that's what they were taught to do. And the murder in the first week of the war even surprised the Germans. We kids, I mean, I have great respect for teenagers. We caught on just like that. And we as teenagers were literally the first ones to say what's going to happen to us. Our parents, the older people said, Germany, the civilized country, you know, the most civilized country in Europe, will do any such thing? Impossible. But we teenagers, we caught on. There is something about it. And to this day, I respect teenagers.
One of the things that has affected me so much in reading the biographies that go along with the portraits of this exhibit is how many children, how many people were young children at the time the war began for them. And in fact, we have 10 to 12 out of a total of 60 who were very young children and who have very powerful memories. And several children between the ages of 8 and 10 who were orphaned or believed themselves to be orphaned, who had to fend for themselves, and did. In some cases, they had to look after younger siblings, and they did. And that, to me, is a level of experience that I think most Americans, most Westerners, certainly most people living today do not think about in relation to children. These are kids who managed to survive, and that, to me, is truly remarkable, and a statement about the resiliency of the human spirit and, in these particular instances, the strength of character for these young people.
You know, my life has been one lucky coincidence after another. One Sunday morning, I still remember it, I was sent out to do some shopping, food shopping. I was the only one who looked Polish. I was very blonde, and as I was coming back, I saw my father and the rest of the group led out to a van by, I think it was mixture Polish and German police. Again, I was lucky, I just happened not to be there. If I had been there 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later, I wouldn't be here today. I was on my own. We had already made some arrangements to have a bed to sleep in another location. So I went there, and so I had shelter. They gave me a little money, and I went to business. I used to go to the market, buy fruit and vegetables, bring it back to our neighborhood and sell door to door.
As a Polish vendor?
As a Polish vendor, yeah. I mean, life was screwy in those days. It wasn't anything normal.
Do you find it amazing that a boy of 10 could do this virtually on his own?
I know, sounds strange. But it wasn't surprising, it wasn't amazing then. The problem when you deal in food is you also start consuming your inventory, so. August 15th was the deadline when all the Jews had to move into the ghetto. We started out with about 25,000 Jews in the ghetto. And within a month or so, they had everybody assemble at a square. And there was just a German sergeant, just as everybody had to go by. Whoever stayed in the homes were killed. Just right, left, nobody knew which side was on. 10,000 people were marched off to a nearby fort where they were all killed. Within 6 months after they took the 10,000 away, they came in one day while most people were away at work and gathered up all the old people and small children and took them away and got them killed. But ghetto life, went on. People worked. I worked in the supply room, but the German civilian that was the head of the supply room used to sell tires on the black market, and he used to make me deliver them outside. And I guess if I was caught, I'd be shot, but I had to do that.
Life in ghetto, it was cramped. It was cold. We did not have no coal to heat the houses. It was hard work. They did organize the eldest of the Juden, the Romkowski. He said the ghetto will tick like a clock. There was hunger. We got a limited amount of food. We got a quarter of a bread for a whole week. You can imagine one was hungry when you get the bread, so you start to cut it. You cut one side, you cut the other. It lasted 3 days, and the rest we didn't have anything. You experiment when they had some kind of coffee we made, which I don't know what it was. It was not real coffee. So when you did strain it from the leftover, you made some kind of pancakes, so you had something to put in your stomach. People died from hunger. So did my father. My father died in 41. When we didn't go to war, it was hunger and death. That's it.
What I remember the most is seeing children dead in the streets. There were a lot of children didn't have any parents. The parents were sent somewhere. They left the kids, and that's what I remember the most, seeing children. I remember there was one little boy, an Anya's hamburger. He was about 5 years old, and I saw him in the street, and he was sitting and crying, and I took him to my house, to my room, and he lived with us for about 6 months, and then he died. I don't know what he died from. But this is what I remember the most. I mean, children dead in the streets.
We were living a real good, simple life in Franklin at that time when I was growing up. However, one Sunday morning, I go to Sunday school, and after Sunday school, we have about a 15-minute break before church service. And in Franklin at that time, no businesses were open on Sunday except one drugstore. And it happened to be just around the corner from the church. So we as teenagers, I was 16 at this time, walk around the corner to White's drugstore. And there we'd buy a Coke and stand around and talk just like any other teenager would. And in that particular morning, someone got our attention and turned the radio up so we could all hear. And everybody got quiet, and we heard for the first time that the Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor.
A date which will live in infamy.
So we as teenagers heard that news and put our unfinished Cokes down and walked out of the drugstore because we knew what was going to happen. Now, I had never really been out of the state of Tennessee before in my life. World War II changed the world because those people like me were scattered out all over the world.
I went into service when I was 20 years old. And the reason I went in, nearly everybody else was gone. Well, I sort of felt foolish being by myself. I mean, I wasn't by myself, but I decided I'd just go on in. And so I was sworn in, I think the day I was 20 years old.
Did you understand at all what the overall mission would be for the Americans going over there, not just you personally? You were going over to apprehend the Germans.
We had to win.
Right, okay. So you basically had no understanding about the Jews at all, only that you had to go in and you were to win.
It is so worrisome to wonder what will happen to the impact of the Holocaust, what will happen to the impact of the most horrific genocide known to our humanity in the generations to come. And we hope that this exhibit will serve as one part to keep the conversation and the historical accuracy of what happened in the Holocaust alive.
Tennessee is not a state where you think of Holocaust survivors. It's a small population of Jews to begin with. It's not a place where you think they'd pay much attention to the Holocaust, but we're very lucky to have a Tennessee Holocaust Commission. Most states don't have a state agency whose goal and mission is to educate people about the Holocaust, so we are lucky to have that. There have been other projects around the country, at least, where survivors have been photographed and and interviews have been made, but none of them attempted to look at an entire state and collect and document that information from one state. That's what makes it unique.
People started to hear rumors that ghettos are being liquidated and people are being sent east to work. By this time, the ghetto counted already 20,000 people. Why? They brought Jews from the surrounding area, from the little towns, from the villages, from the little hamlets. They were all concentrated now in the ghetto. Later we understood the plan was a diabolic plan to concentrate the Jews so they would have them easily under their thumb where they could be transported to their deaths. But we didn't know it. The ghetto was liquidated, but it was yet not the end. Now a small ghetto came into being. From the 20,000 Jews that lived in the ghetto, 630 were left behind. We did not know the 20,000 within 24 hours were gassed to death in the death camp of Treblinka. Their bodies burned, only ashes remained, no sign that they ever existed. So on that one day, out of a family of 18 of us who lived, of my family, 4 of us were left, 4 out of 18. We were now in a small ghetto. We had to clean the houses. We had to sort their clothing. We had to sort the furniture, their shoes. Everything had to be crated and everything had to be sent to Germany. At this time, we already had the premonition things are not right. Why? Because among the shoes that we had to sort, we recognized the shoes of our loved ones. Once we were done, from November to May, with the sorting and packing the possession of the Jewish people, we were sent to the first concentration camp.
When they liquidated the ghetto, I had been hiding with my little girl. My husband was not there already. They took away a lot of men from the ghetto. She was pretty, red-headed, black eyes, a dark skin, little nose and little mouth, and so smart. She used to tell me, beautiful mamchiku, mother. They found out there are some kids in the place where I was. So one morning they came. It was March the 27th, 1943, a Monday, cold morning. They came and they told us that the kids have to be taken to the doctors for them to see if the kids are healthy. We believed them. And they took away the kids from us. The kids still 15 years old. We want to go with them. They didn't let us. You're still young, you can work for us. Then the kids, they took all the kids, they took them to Auschwitz, and they burned them.
We didn't really know anything what's going on. We didn't have no radio, no newspaper. There was one person in the ghetto, a doctor, which had a radio. And sometimes he lets know some people and just got around. But we didn't know anything what's going on. Sometimes we thought that this is going to last forever. Sometimes we did think this. They had liquidations all the time. They have selections all the time. I usually did hide my mother, and I did go to the selection. I said, I'm young, I look good, they're not going to take me. I was lucky with that, because they took somebody. Then there was a list, and it so happened that my mother was on the list. And I found out he was on the list, so I tried to do what I could. I was in a line to get bread, and I knew the guy, so he said, wait a little bit, and I'll give you a bread. So I was waiting. In the meantime, the Germans came, and we had to run away. I ran to the cemetery. We were afraid. We just didn't know where to run. And finally, my mother was home, and she was screaming because she knew what's going on. When I came back, we just couldn't take it any longer. So we went to the transport. They said they sent us to another ghetto. They gave us our bread, they told us to take some things with us, and we did. But we came to Auschwitz. We didn't even know what Auschwitz was. And we came there in the middle of the night. It was so frightening when we did get out of the train. They right away they said left, right. The men left, the women separate. Then they started to go to a selection. So they sent my mother together with those with the children. They said right away to the crematorium. And I begged them to, I said, this is my mother, and I begged them to, and he looked at me. Then they were working by the transport, some prisoners were working. They knew where the other people are going. And these two prisoners claimed I was arguing with him to go together with my mother. They just took and dragged me away. And this was my ticket to live. And this is the last time I saw my mother.
Let me tell you about the first day of work. We were called to the master. He was really a master of our life. A small room, he stands there again, the uniform, the shiny boots, the legs spread, the hands on the hip. You Jewish swines, you are sabotaging. You let the bad casing together with the good one. We didn't know what we do. Who of us had seen a casing of a bullet before? And he started to beat us, 3 of us, from one machine. I lost this time 17 teeth. He hit so badly. He aimed really between the eyes. We were so beaten, 3 of us, that words fail me to explain it. I tell you only that I lost 17 teeth, spit them out. And he sent us back after, I don't know, probably half an hour treatment. But this was a lesson. We knew right away to put even when there was a mark. We didn't know if can go or not. We put it with the bad ones. We were definitely not getting enough food. We were given sink, ugly-looking containers and a wooden spoon, and we are getting the soup. I looked at the soup. It was a gray substance with some pieces floating in it. And the pieces looked like beads, only were gray. It was really horrible. but I ate it. And right around me were maybe 12 girls. We will be with you. How can you eat it? I said, you will not eat, we will starve. And this is how you made friendship. Giving example to live, wanting to live, apparently. But there was no vivid, I want to live. No. You take it as it comes.
In that camp in Częstochowa, we had over there, he was, I don't think he was a rabbi, but he was a very religious man, and he told us, you do every possible thing to survive and stay alive so that people once will know what happened here. Those was his words that I remember till today. You want to stay alive. The will of life is pushing you to do things that you don't think about them, but you do it. You know, sometimes we were standing hours in snow. This especially later in Buchenwald when it was in January, in February, in March in Germany. It's so cold. And we were standing hours outside and they were counting us and always making mistakes in counting, so counting and recounting, and we were standing hours in the freezing temperatures. To look older, I was, you know, if it was snow, then I was making a pile of snow and trying to stand on the pile of snow when they were counting us so that I will look taller and maybe older, so they won't think that I'm a child and take me out for it. If you were late for the count, you had to go to a special place where they were beating you as a punishment for being late. So one of those days he said that the Germans that was beating, well, today you will do the beating. And he gave me that stick, and there were other people with me that were also late, and they had to lay down, and I had to beat them with that. It was like a baseball bat, something like this. So I was beating, and he told me, stronger, stronger. I couldn't beat them stronger. At the end, he said, well, now I will show you how you are supposed to beat somebody. And I had to lay down, and he beat me. I just passed out. And this is one of those beatings that I got from them. For just being late a few minutes to a count.
I was sent to a labor camp when I was 15 years old. And I have here a document that I keep as a memorabilia. It's my identification card to the labor camp. There were many jobs that we used to have in the camp. In summer, we used to work in a vegetable garden from morning until night. Stealing them, we could eat them. So on this hand, I can say that we had an advantage working into a garden. But the most dangerous jobs was dismantling unexploded bombs. You know, they were bombs that were thrown out with a timer. So after a bomb was hitting the ground and did not explode, people will know that it's an unexploded bomb. The task was to go and to dismantle the timer so the bomb will not explode. It was quite a dangerous job, and it was reserved for Jewish young people. After a bombardment, we were called to clean the debris. While cleaning the debris, you could find dead people under and that we had to take out. It was not too pleasant for a child, 15 years old, to do such jobs, but we had to do them. And probably one of the very, very dramatic, tragic work was during the winter. In Romania has heavy winters. We were supposed to clean the snow from the street. You know, many people are asking, why did you survive? The simple answer is Hitler did not have the transportation, the means to send us to Auschwitz, and did not have the means at Auschwitz to work faster. I was brought up in a very observant home where God was praised every moment. And this gave me, instilled in me, the confidence and the belief that God will help us survive. like he helped us in many moments of crisis. We believed, especially those who were religious, like myself, believed in God. Believed that God is here, but not not God exterminates the Jews, the Nazis. God was a prisoner like we all there. And we had the feeling that we have to be strong and determined and do whatever they were asking us to work in dangerous places to survive.
When we were in Buchenwald, we heard, you know, the bombing, that the planes were bombing each time closer and closer to our area. And then it was on April 11, 1945, we suddenly came out and we didn't see the Germans anymore in the towers, you know, in the watchtowers. We didn't see Germans. And we climbed on the roof of that wooden barracks that we were living in, and we saw from both sides of Buchenwald, we saw tanks, American tanks coming from both sides of Buchenwald. And that's how we were liberated.
This lieutenant and I was together, and the first thing we seen, there's some dead horses, there's some dead cows. And he said, wait a minute, I said, what is this here? And then we seen the gate up there. He said, go in there. And it was Buchenwald.
What were you thinking when you saw this?
I couldn't think. I thought, what is this, you know? And I never will forget an American soldier that was standing there looking, what he said. He said, I don't believe there's a God in heaven. That's what he said. And I couldn't answer him. I just stood there. I'd never seen nothing like this, you know.
You saw the people that were starving.
Yeah, all the people that I've seen had been starved.
You saw the ashes from the crematorium.
That's where they cleaned out the furnaces, and they put that on the fields to fertilize.
You saw the oven.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the bodies. You saw the barracks, roughly 4 or 5 to a bunk.
Oh, yeah. And like I say, none of them was very strong. You could tell that, you know. Some of the inmates, they were laying outside on the ground, and I would kneel down to see if they were breathing or if they were dead. And some of them were dead, and some of them were breathing. I just was curious, you know, to see, because they wasn't in these piles, see.
Had the Nazis already abandoned the camp?
Yeah.
How do you explain to yourself and to your son what that kind of level of evil and inhumanity really means when you think about it?
Well, all he had to do was get about 200 people to believe like he did. And the other people were scared. And then they all started believing like he told them to, you know. But I believed all my life, for evil to exist, all it takes is for good people to do nothing.
The thing that is very powerful about their stories is their total lack of preparedness for what they experienced. Partly because I don't think their commanding officers were aware of what they would find. There were literally thousands, tens of thousands of slave labor camps all over Europe. And when our troops and the British troops and the Soviet troops, who were the liberating forces, came upon these camps, the conditions that they found there were horrific, just horrific. These men who in some cases went in and out of these camps in a matter of 24 or 48 hours, just long enough to help stabilize the situation, make sure that no more guards were left, and perhaps begin feeding programs, were changed forever. And they talk about being haunted by nightmares and the vision of these desperate people.
My division, which was the 42nd Infantry Division, was to take the city of Munich in Bavaria, the largest city in southern Germany, which is directly south after we crossed. But for some reason, my company, E Company, 232nd Infantry Regiment, 2nd Battalion, we went in a southeasterly direction rather than a due south. And that took us to the left of Munich. We left just before dawn. We arrived on a slopey hill down to a pretty little village, really, about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. It's cold, it's damp. But the little village was overwhelmed by a large wall comparable to the wall in this room. And it was quite large. The village was Dachau, Germany. Didn't know it at the time. And our objective was to take this, whatever it was. We knew it was some sort of camp. We didn't have any idea what kind of camp. I think I thought it was some kind of army camp. And as we approached it, there was a terrible odor. And on the northeast corner, they had a large gate for allow boxcars to enter and to leave, whatever this was. Now, by now, I'm a staff sergeant. And when we get down, you have about 3 feet on either side of the boxcars to enter through the gates. I go to the right around the end car to go in on the opposite side from where we had approached. And that put me on the door side of the boxcars. And there for the first time, I saw the bodies. Had no idea who they were, where they come from. They were all dead. And they had the striped clothes on. Their head was the largest part of their body. You could see every rib in their body. Their arms and legs about like broomsticks. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were not soldiers. See, I've seen soldiers, both ours and Germans, dead, but nobody like this. And I remember asking my friend Charles Thiessen from Long Island, I said, who are these people? He said, they're Jews. Well, I didn't understand that because you see, in Franklin, we only had 3 Jewish families. So I said, the Jews, well, you don't stop and analyze anything. Get in there and get in there and get it done. So we get inside, and they have large buildings. So we go from building to building. We are surprised to see all these big buildings inside of a camp. Well, what it was where they're storing the equipment for the SS troops, and they're using the prisoners for labor is what they were doing. And I didn't know that at the time, but we could hear gunfire ahead of us and to our right. What we didn't know is some other troops had already entered the front gate. We came in through the back gate, so to speak, through the railroad gate. And we finally linked up with them, and just as we linked up with them, there is a barbed wire fence, a watered moat, another wall, and it's obviously, there's somebody in there they don't want out. We realized then it was a prison camp of some kind for the first time. And we moved to our left. I'm gonna talk quickly because I don't like this part. We moved to our left and found the gate, wrought iron fence, Arbeiten machen Sie frei, which means work makes you free. And there was a little bridge over the moat. Then there was another barbed wire fence. And on the other side of it was just a sea of faces. And they all appeared to be dead, but yet they were alive. And we let them out.
Well, the first thing I knew about the camp was quite a distance before we got there, you could smell the odor from the crematory. And that was a horrible thing. It almost felt like you couldn't breathe. When we got to the main gate, the guards had fled, so we went in the camp. There was a long row of naked corpses that were waiting to be sent to the crematory. And alongside them were all these prisoners just standing there with, well, amazement on their face, shock. They didn't know really what was going on, I guess. And they were just maybe a couple hundred of them where I was, standing there looking at me. Most of them looked like they were almost starved to death. As I walked along looking at them, I thought, this is what hell is like, with all the way these people look, there's dead bodies. And I was just overcome with everything. And I looked up at the sky and said, God, get me out of this place. And when I looked back down, there was a man coming from this group over to the fence where I was. And he said in German, do you have a cigarette? Well, I had about 3 packs, and I thought if I bring out the cigarettes and all these people stand here, I don't have enough to give them, and I'll have a riot on my hands. So I said, no, I don't have any. And he said, ein momento, 1 minute. And he ran off behind the barracks, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but shortly he came back, and he put his hand through the openings in the wire and handed me this little rusty can, and inside was a cigarette butt about 1 inch long, water stained, and looked like he had dug it up out of the ground. And I felt this was the biggest treasure this poor man has. And he said, this is in thanks for liberating us. At that moment, everything completely changed from horror to making me feel like, you know, I'm really doing something good, being part of the liberation of these people. And after thinking about this, which I have ever since, 50-some years, I've become to realize that that was God's answer to my prayer. He had that man give me that, and it just totally changed my feeling of despair at seeing all this to a feeling of joy that I was really doing something to help these people.
That's one of the most beautiful words in the world is home, coming home. No matter where you live, but my home happened to be in Tennessee. And so when I came home, I thought this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, be able to survive and come home again.
You didn't say anything, but you thought, man, I am getting close to home, you know. I've been gone over 2 years from the States, 2 years and a month, you know. Everybody was happy, you know, because we didn't know when the war was going to end. We was going to be in there till the war ended. I guess the first biggest surprise I hadn't gotten home yet, is when we got off the ship in New York, and they loaded us on buses to take us to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And to see all these homes with the lights on and people out walking, that was a shock to us. We hadn't seen nothing like this in years. At night, everything was blacked out. I got back to Elizabethton, and of course, the first thing I wanted to do was go to work. And it took some getting used to. It was November now, and I'd come in from outside and I'd leave the front door open. My mother said, Harry, close the door. The kind of living I've been doing, you didn't worry about closing the door. You was outside all day and all this stuff, you know, snowing and that kind of thing. They don't shut the war down just because it's snowing. They don't stop nothing. And if you talk to somebody that wasn't in the war, they didn't understand a thing of war about what you're talking about.
Everybody was so happy that the war was over. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. It took several years before us to settle down and look back and say, hey, this thing happened and we hadn't done anything about it.
I'll tell you how we came to Memphis. My husband had a friend which went to the United States. A friend told him if there will be a registration to go to the United States, so let's register. So I told him, go ahead and register. There was a registration. I really forgot about it. I didn't even think about it. We thought we'd go to Israel. But I told him in Israel, the life is so hard and I went through so much, I really can't take it anymore. So then one day they called him to come to Munich, and he told them that he is a furniture finisher. They had furniture stores. So they brought him to Memphis. Here was the E.L. Bruce, there was the furniture factory. So this is why they assigned us to Memphis. We didn't even know where Memphis was. We knew New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, but Memphis, everybody felt sorry for me that we're going to Memphis. It's somewhere on the Mississippi. We looked it up on the map. And so this is how we came to Memphis. We came in the middle of the night. Somebody picked us up, still today, I don't know who it is. They took us to Hotel Tennessee in a taxi, and that's it. Then I walked in. They put us on the 13th floor in the hotel. They expected us. They knew we were coming. And I look out. Across the street was the Peabody Hotel. And next to the Peabody Hotel was a car dealer. And I saw some cars on the roof. I said, oh my God, how does a car get on the roof? This I couldn't understand. We looked down. Now I know how a car gets, but I couldn't understand how does a car get on a roof.
The Mays that are in Nashville, Jacob May started the May hosiery mill in Nashville. And through Jacob May, we were able to come to the USA. They had a factory here, May hosiery mill, where they employed many people as they came over, because in actuality, in 1939, you had to provide people with work in order to bring them over. And my dad came here and worked at the May hosiery mill, and my mom did too. And my mama had never worked. And it was quite a shock for us, the children, because my mother left my brother and I alone during the day while she worked at the mill, and I was sort of the caretaker of my little brother. I should have been probably in the 3rd grade, but they put me back to the 1st grade because I didn't understand one word of English. But it was wonderful. And I remember when I walked to school, it was the greatest thing. I mean, in the springtime, I thought it was so wonderful to see the grass. I really appreciated nature. This was a freedom I had never experienced, because I really was so fearful in Germany. Anybody that's survived anything, I think you have a different view of the world. I really appreciate the sunshine, the rain. I appreciate it all because I've been able to experience it all. And I feel like at this time of my life, I have to savor every moment. And gee, I've had a lot of moments that most of my family has not had.
We were honored to be able to do this. We knew we were doing something important, something very worthwhile, and something that would have a lasting effect on people. That's what you hope for as a photographer. That's what you hope for as a writer, that your work has value, that it has meaning, that you've done right by the person you've been speaking with and photographing.
I think that the most powerful impact on me personally has been the variety of experience and the power of the memories for each person. We have people from virtually every country in Europe that was affected in one way or another by the Second World War. You see in that variety the breadth of the calamity that World War II was for the European population.
These survivors talk to students, talk to school groups, and I think that's a great educational experience. It's not going to happen forever. And so we hope that this collection of photographs and interviews will have a lasting value to educate the people of Tennessee about what it is that really happened in the Holocaust.
They were the only eyewitnesses we have to that historic time, and their stories converge. One gentleman was a liberator of Buchenwald. One of our survivors was liberated at Buchenwald. That is an incredible connection to be at that moment in history, that moment in time, where one freed a person and the other person was finally free.
Learning more about diversity is an important thing. We have a lot to learn from other people. We should ask people of a certain generation, what was it like back then? We should talk to our parents and our grandparents and the guy who works at our school and the guy who sells us groceries, because we might be surprised what they have to tell us.
This program has been made possible by the generous support of Robert S. Lipman, Lipman Brothers, and by Mrs. Berney Steiner, and members of Nashville Public Television. Living On is available on DVD. To order, visit NPT's website at wnpt.net/livingon.